Well, guys, it's 5:03. I want to get started with this, and I hope you all got my announcement that I was extending quiz 3, and in a large part, due to the fact that a lot of people were having trouble doing the task about finding peer-reviewed articles. So I got this online right now. I got it in real time, and I'll run through it again because I looked at the video of the class on Wednesday, and I'll take a lot of responsibility. I think it was kind of confusing, and I was trying to do it via screenshots, and so anyway, we'll do it live, and I'll show you what I want. I want you to find 5 peer-reviewed articles about subject, a subject covered in our textbook, a subject covered in this class, either now, previously, or in the future. And so I want you to get 5 sources. I want you to uh, copy those sources, paste them into a Word doc, and then I want you to pull the abstracts or descriptions from those search results and put those on the Word doc and submit the Word doc. Now, I had like 4 or 5 people that did it, and uh, 3 or 4 of them were pretty good. One of them, it didn't get much. So let me go through this with you. First of all, this is the library homepage. You know that. You've seen that. Hopefully, you're on this quite a bit. And so on the bottom, we have a menu. And the way I was doing it last week was I was going through the journals and kind of backing into what you needed to get. This time we'll do it this way, and it's actually a lot better and not quite as quirky. Submit this, hit articles, and you put your subject here. And so let's do Picasso, for example, and articles and search. And so these are all articles and other things about Picasso, but what we want are peer review sources. So you find your filters, your limiters over here, and you want full text and you want peer reviewed. Peer reviewed is, as I said before, the gold standard. And see, this changes everything, but everything on this site is peer reviewed. And so we got Picasso. And so what I'd like you to do is to go through this, start here, copy all the way down through the 5th result. Or you can mix and match, but it doesn't really matter. Copy and paste this in a Word doc. Boom, you got it. You got the first half done. And so, what I want you to do after that is open up each one of the 5. And so we got this. And I told you the abstract or description. And for number one, this is what you would copy and paste onto your Word doc. This is the abstract slash description. Take a look at the prompt. You'll see I made one. Uh, Follow that format. And the description of this is aesthetical issues of Leonardo da Vinci's and Pablo Picasso paintings with stochastic evaluation. So, physical process is characterized as complex when it is difficult to analyze or explain in a simple way. That's really true. Those are the secrets of the old masters. That's true with Jackson Pollock. We don't know exactly how he was able to get some of the drip patterns. Okay, so the complexity within a painting is expected to be high, possibly comparable to that of nature. Therefore, the constructions of artists, paintings, music, literature, are also expected to be of high complexity since they are produced by numerous human logic, instinct, emotion, and non human quality of paint, papers, and tools, processes interacting with each other in a complex manner. So on. That's for number one. You can go back, open up this, and this one has an abstract. It's not a description, it's an abstract. Copy, paste into your Word document. Do that for all five, and you'll be done. So does that make sense? Any questions? See, when you check these, it actually comes up here. Anyway, just saying. These are all peer reviewed. And one of the things I want to say with this is that whatever subject you choose, you may not find what you're at least uh, you think you're looking for. That's not the point. I had some issues with that in the past. People get their minds stuck and say, I want to know who Pablo Picasso's cousins are or something. And they can't find it under peer review. And so they just give up. That's not the point of this exercise. I don't I didn't care other than the subject up here, your keyword. Other than that, what other issues come up is okay. The issues are fine. Uh, that's not part of the grade, and you may not find exactly what you were looking for. But what I want to know is that you know how to retrieve peer reviewed articles from academic journals. So, what do you say? Not talking, eh? Well, good. So that's due Wednesday night, and we'll move on then. And let's see, participants. Yeah, we all good here. Um, It's freezing. It's freezing up. Let's see if I can't get. Well, guys, hang on here a little bit. I might have to just totally back out of this and wonder why this froze. Hang on. I'll get us there. And now you know why it was. I didn't really like the idea of doing that live in class because the Zoom makes funny things happen. So you guys still with me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I think we have it. You guys see Impressionism, post-Impressionism, and all of that?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, thank you so much, and thanks for your patience. This Zoom doesn't like you to change web browsers and websites and things. It doesn't move very easily between one and the other. And so this is where we left off. Post-Impressionism. And that really doesn't have a stylistic sort of designation. It just simply means what happened after Impressionism. And as I was saying earlier, things really splinter. There are a lot of fractures. There are a lot of artists doing a lot of different things. One really not having much to do with the other. And so before I start showing you some of the artwork, I want to kind of set it up this way. In post-Impressionism, we got people who are more scientific in their approach. And when we get there, I'll show you what I mean about scientific or rational. Those artists actually, in retrospect, have been likened to what other movements have we seen that have depended on logic, rationalism, knowledge, scientific method, if you will. Neoclassicism, classicism, Renaissance art, Da Vinci, Jacques-Louis David, Ong, all of those people. That's all a kind of strain. And some of the post-impressionists actually do stuff that is much more scientific, rational, and logically based. And then we get a whole other side of post-impressionism that deals with emotions, feelings, how to convey the spirit of things, how to convey an emotional or invoke an emotional response in the viewer. And we've seen that with romanticism, things that stir the emotions. And then we got others that are kind of going off on other ideas, trying to get into areas of um, myth, belief, superstition, symbolism, the supernatural, and so on. But at any rate, that gives you an idea of the breadth of what happens in the years immediately following Impressionism. And so, one of the post Impressionists that's considered to be pretty important here is Henri Toulouse-Lautrec at the Moulin Rouge. And what does he get from Impressionism? A lot. And he's kind of like Degas in how he composes his pictures in a way that almost resembles how a camera shot might look, especially if you weren't paying close attention in the viewfinder. You see the bar here, and it's kind of taken up a lot of space, probably about 20%, 15-20% of this composition is just here. It's just there. I mean, it's what you would call, in a classical sense, wasted space. What we have here, though, is that Lautrec is kind of doing some things with color that's really kind of creepy, kind of odd. Look at how he's portrayed this woman. And she's got all of this white makeup, but because of the background, because of the environment, she has this green shadow on her face, and it's almost as though she's lit from under her chin. You see the shadow right there. It's almost like if you hold a flashlight in front of your face, and you do that when you're on a camp out or something, telling scary stories. And so, anyway, that's going on. And kind of a lot of the detail is just kind of swallowed up. And even though it's oil on canvas, this looks like it could have been done with pastel, especially the way that all of this is put together. I'll take a zoom in on some of this. See, that's brushwork, but that easily could be pastel marks. And so we got people kind of moving in some other directions. And Lautrec was kind of an interesting person. He was born into money. He was sort of from a very well to do family. And as a child, he had an accident that broke both of his legs, and they never healed properly. And so he was this guy who was really very short because his legs never grew. And so his family kind of disowned him. He had some money, he could support himself. He went to Paris, he became an artist. And why am I going on about this? Is because, as I said earlier, Paris was the center. This is where things were happening, not only in the arts, in medicine, in science, in philosophy, in literature, and so on and so on and so on. And so he went there. And he kind of took some of the ideas about the Paris nightlife and stuff. Actually, he became kind of a guy who was right in the middle of all of that stuff. And he would hang out in brothels, and he had a lot of people in his orbit that were sort of the party set of Paris, if you will. But here we go. Um, and one of the things that he did was, because as I said, Paris was the place, and it had all of the cabarets, the nightclubs, and so on. And um, what we have here is a poster, and what we were talking about here earlier. I'm going to go back a little bit. One of the things that I was telling you about was how Japanese prints made such an impression on a lot of the artists in Paris at the time. And this one right here. See, in this Japanese woodblock print, this area is basically just all flat. And the idea of just big areas of flat color to represent something, it wasn't something that was done in Western art, not much. And so take a look at Jane Avril's legs and the skirt, a big, and so it's a lithograph. It's another kind of print. It's not made with a wood block, but made of stone. And so anyway, instead of seeing these characteristics of the medium as limitations, actually, they went right with the limitations of the medium and used them to their advantage. And so this is, a lot of people talk about, here's his signature, by the way, too. Oh, previous, I gotta hit the wrong clicker, zoom in. Henri Toulouse-Lautrec. Anyway, there you go. The idea of making posters and making them in a way that actually resemble Japanese woodblock prints. That was something entirely new. And it is one of the contributions, should I say, of Toulouse-Lautrec. And so the good life, you guys probably recognize this. Sunday on the Isle of La Grande. And here it is, a Sunday on La Grande. And bottom line is this. You guys have seen this before, I'm sure. If you've seen anything, you've probably seen this. So what do they call this kind of painting? It's one that actually has something of a style that's named for it.
Isn't it a dot painting?
Yes, it is. It's a dot painting, and I would add to that the way he painted it, and it is with dots, and that's why the last slide, you see all of these little dots of color. We're in a time here where what these guys experiment with will actually resonate for the next 100-something years till the present. And so it's dot painting. It's been called pointillism because each of the brush strokes all of the brush strokes are dots. And what we would call that in today's language, we'd call it pixels. And what Seurat thought about, because he saw all of this Impressionist painting, was that he saw that when somebody like Claude Monet would paint haystacks, he would put a red next to a yellow, next to a green, next to a blue, and so and so and so. And so, bottom line, he saw that you could put two colors next to each other and make a third color. That happens with pixelation. And so when you see a screen, I want to see who knows about this. When you see something like the screen you're looking at, a television screen or whatever, it's basically four colors. And it's called CMYK. You guys know about this?
Yeah.
Yes. What does it mean?
CMYK, doesn't it mean cyan, magenta, yellow, black, something like that?
That's exactly what that means. Good job, Mia. Yeah, that's exactly right. And from those four colors, and if you have an inkjet printer, you might have a yellow, you may have just that, CMYK. And it gets you to every color that you need in whatever proportions or ratios, along with, in the case of printing, the white of the paper. But bottom line is that this was a scientific approach to painting. And like I say, it still resonates today. It was an intellectual exercise. Actually, they wrote books on this. They called it divisionism at the time. They didn't call it pointillism or dotism or any of the other things, but it was basically about the optical mix of color. That if you put those colors next to each other, your eye will read them. If you put dots of yellow next to dots of red, you'll see basically orange. And when you throw in the violets on there, you see the shadows. And so this one got reds and it's got some oranges, and it doesn't really have a whole lot of yellows, but you go in the grass. You see all of these different kinds of greens and colors, etc., etc., etc. And so pointillism, part of post-impressionism. And you see where this is at? The Art Institute of Chicago. San Diego Museum of Art. Art Institute of Chicago. What's that all about? We've been seeing things that come from the Uffizi Gallery in France, in Italy, the Louvre in France, and the Prado in Spain, and all of this French stuff is in America. You guys know what that's all about? I'm going to leave the other one up. No idea? Let me tell you. This is a simplified explanation, but it's accurate. What we have in America in the late 19th century is American prosperity. After the Civil War, all of this industry that was built up to prosecute the Civil War, all of the steel mills, all of the foundries, all of the factories, all of this industrial capacity was turned towards building the economy and expanding the US. So what happens? We start building railroads all over the place. We're not building cannon, we're not making rifles and bullets. We're using that steel to link the country together. And we're building bridges and all of this stuff. And a lot of people are making a lot of money on this. And so people like Andrew Carnegie kind of takes over the steel industry and becomes fabulously rich. Rockefeller takes over oil, becomes tremendously rich. We see people like J.P. Morgan taking over banking, and so on and so on and so on. There's a lot of money being made in the US, and there were a lot of people who had money to spend. And a lot of those people hired art connoisseurs, art experts, to go over to France and buy paintings and send them back to the US. And they got these paintings really at bargain prices, because although we look at this in hindsight as being the important art of the late 19th century, most of the people in France were still buying academic art, and academic art was fetching high prices. People like Bouguereau, the nymphs and satyr that we saw, that kind of artwork was what the French were interested in. And these guys, they were making out okay, but those Americans went over there and bought up all this stuff and brought it back. One of the things that was said about America was that we didn't have that rich history. We didn't have well-developed art schools. We didn't have that cutting edge, what they call avant-garde. That's what that means, cutting edge, forward edge. We didn't have that. And so these guys see in this Helen Birch Bartlett Memorial Collection, 1926. So as these wealthy Americans were dying off, they donated their paintings to places like the Art Institute of Chicago. And so anyway, that's why we have all of this stuff, because and I say this reluctantly, but a lot of those people, the Vanderbilts, the Goulds, the Morgans, Carnegies, all those guys, they were, by many people, they were called robber barons, because we had an unfair economic system, and a lot of people got really, really rich, and most of the people in the US were basically pretty poor. But these robber barons bought up all of this stuff, and as they died, they donated. So that's how we got it. And so another guy, Vincent van Gogh, I'm sure you heard of. And he has yet an interesting lifestyle, interesting life story as well. He was the son of a preacher decided that he was going to minister to the poor people. And if I had the map, you would see that in northern France and in Belgium, there were a lot of coal mines up there. Again, we go back to that idea of industrialization. What fueled that? Coal. Coal fueled the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. And so, like here, like in West Virginia, where the coal went up to Pittsburgh and fed the steel mills of Andrew Carnegie. It was the same thing going on in Europe. And like Europe, like West Virginia and Appalachia, these coal miners worked very hard and made very little money. And so Vincent, being inspired to bring the gospel, to bring religion, to minister to these people, also painted them, made art about their lives. And he was not only just a minister, he was really interested in, can you guess? Realism, the Gleaners, the Stonebreakers, Millet, Courbet, and others of French realism, Daumier, the third class carriage. Vincent van Gogh was very much artistically aligned with those artists. He thought that painting real people doing real things was what art should be about. And they are the potato eaters. And I'll tell you a little bit about what that means. Well, they are actually eating potatoes, but potatoes was pretty much the staple of the staple in the diet of poor people in Europe, in Ireland, in Russia, and so on. And the reason potatoes were the main food is that they were easy to grow. They would keep for a long time. If you could take potatoes and keep them in a cool, dry place, they would last a long time and they would keep over the winter when food would be scarce. And that's why in Russia they were really into potatoes. In fact, they found so many uses for potatoes, they invented vodka, for example. Bottom line is that that's what poor people ate because you could put them in a cool, dry place and they'd keep and you'd have food for the winter. Of course, it was a sustenance diet. It wasn't anything particularly tasty or fancy, but that's the point. These people are just getting by. And they're working in the coal mines, and they're poor, and elevating ordinary people doing ordinary things up to the level of art was realism. And so we have it on the records. Van Gogh kept a diary, and he talked about a lot of those same artists, the French realists that I mentioned. And so that didn't quite work out, though. Basically, he was, I would say, a failure at being a minister. He identified too much with the poor people and he got in trouble with the bishop. And anyway, he had to find another line of work. And so he just became a painter. And he went down to Paris and he saw all of this stuff that all of these other artists were doing at that time in the 1880s. And I showed you the Jane Avril lithograph that was made by Toulouse-Lautrec, and the idea of having broad flat areas represent three-dimensional stuff. That was right out of Japanese printmaking. Here he is, Japan Asiri, Flowering Plum Tree, 1887. Want to know if you had influence? This is a direct copy. This is right out of Japanese art. And as I said last week, that's what Japan had to export to start their modernization program. And I might add this too. Actually, Japanese were very successful at modernizing and catching up with the West in the Industrial Revolution, that by the turn of the century, they had a big navy. They were a naval power. They got in a war with Russia and won. I mean, they became modernized in a lifetime. It was phenomenal. It's one of the stories of quick and major transformation in human history. But their art profoundly influenced a lot of these Europeans. And so Vincent van Gogh, The Night Cafe, 1888. Van Gogh had a very short career, basically from 1888, 1889, a couple of years, just that was it. And so this is a night cafe. This is where he was in his town. I believe this is in Arles, but anyway, he gives up on these ideas of perspective. He understands that you make these lines diagonal to create some illusion of space, and a good way to arrange your composition. But what's starting to happen here is that he's got the lanterns, the lights in this pool hall, in this bar, in this night cafe. And look at how that light is radiating around. It's not pointillism, it's something else entirely. And I'll go on. This is the famous Van Gogh, The Starry Night, 1889. And the idea of painting the stars in a way that they are swirling fireballs, and you see the sky, and it's almost as though the sky is flowing and shaped by the landscape. You see these other forces, the wind blowing. You see this big cypress tree, and it's blowing with the wind. You see this little village here, and it's kind of small, and in a lot of ways, it's kind of insignificant compared to these forces of nature. So he's kind of starts out as a realist, and he starts to turn into a romanticist. If you take a look at Turner's paintings of storms at sea and weather and climate and the forces of nature, you see a lot of that stuff in American romanticism, where Caspar David Friedrich, for example, of course, that comes a little later, but bottom line, look at this. And so he's unapologetic, and he's using this paint in a way that the Impressionists did, in the fact that if you show the brush strokes, that's just okay. but he's not doing that to fool your eye. He's not doing that as a way of making a photograph. I'm gonna take and show you this. See, look at that. It's choppy, it's rough, and there is no denying that this is paint. And that was something that came out of realism through Impressionism. And so this is the beginning of what one might say is Expressionism. And that is where form, shape, color, line are distorted for emotional effect. And that's certainly this. This is a peaceful little village down here in the bottom center with the church and the steeple and the people, and stuff. But really, the forces of nature have taken over. They are tremendous compared to what's going on here. This is humankind. This is nature. And so Van Gogh has kind of an interesting place. There have been a lot of people with a lot of belief systems that have thought a lot about the forces of nature and nature itself, and have written quite a lot about this very specific painting, actually. So, one of Van Gogh's colleagues, friends, actually, is probably about his best friend, was this guy, Paul Gauguin. And same time, 1888. And Vision After the Sermon, Jacob Wrestling with Angels. And so Gauguin has some of this kind of realist stuff. These women here, they're dressed like ordinary women from an ordinary village in northern France, in Belgium, northern France. It's a European kind of thing. Anyway, religion being very important. Jacob wrestling with an angel. They have a vision after the sermon. The preacher is talking about, telling the story of Jacob. They have the vision. A couple of other things going on. Look at this tree. Can I look at that tree? There is a connection. They both admired Japanese art, and they saw the genius in Japanese art. And so that's what's going on. The other part of this that I want to bring your attention to is that this landscape is red. And one of the things that happened with Gauguin was that he thought colors had symbolic significance and emotional significance. And so he used a lot of colors that were not natural. It wasn't naturalistic color. It was oftentimes symbolic color. And one of his masterworks, Paul Gauguin, Where Do We Come From? Where Are We? Where Are We Going? 1897. Museum of Fine Arts. Oh, can I point this out? This is in Scotland, but previous to that, Museum of Modern Art, New York. So the Americans don't have all of them, but they have a lot of them. And this is from the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And what happens with Gauguin, aside from the formal aspects of the color, the composition, the symbolism, and all of that, he goes to Tahiti Tahiti is, we talked about colonization before, was a French colony. And it's in the southern Pacific Ocean. It's one of those places where you could call paradise. And in a lot of ways, very similar to Hawaii, Samoa, um, Fiji, and other places in the Pacific Ocean. The and Gauguin went there, and as he was interested in spirituality, he's still interested in that. But he goes to Tahiti and he sees these Tahitians, and they are living in a manner likely very similar to how they've lived for many, maybe millennia. And they don't have some of the same standards. They don't have some of the same mores. The women and everyone would go with very little clothing. Here is a Tahitian god that he paints in the picture. And the idea, the title, where do we come from? Where are we? Where are we going? It's a philosophical question. Who are we as humankind? And so he loves Tahiti. He becomes very successful, by the way. His life story, he starts out as a banker, an investment banker in Paris, makes a lot of money, and then has this like midlife crisis or whatever. It's just a change. It's just picked it up, quit his job, left his family, left everything behind, and went traveling around the world. He ended up in the Americas. He ended up working on the Panama Canal. And if you know about the Panama Canal, you'll know that the French tried to build that in the late 19th century. They couldn't do it. 10 years later, Americans came along, got the job done. But he went there and he toiled in the hot sun and the disease infested, mosquito infested. Got aboard ship, went in. That's how he ended up in Tahiti, and he kept painting. He came back to Paris, or he came back to France for a while, befriended Van Gogh, left, went back to Tahiti. Bottom line, he was all over the place, and he started bringing these paintings back to Paris, and he was a sensation. The Parisians loved it. Now, when you take a look at it in terms of sophistication, there were a lot of people who thought that this painting was really quite primitive compared to, say, academic art. But bright colors, exotic subjects, they loved it. And he ended up being an actually a success in his own time. He wasn't like some of the others who were never particularly successful in their lifetimes. And so, yeah, this is yet another splinter. Gauguin, Van Gogh, friends, artistically, in a lot of ways, very, very different. Um, Paul Cézanne comes along. He sees what's going on in painting. He's going to do something entirely different too. He's actually going to challenge how we see things. And so I'm going to zoom in on this, and you'll hopefully see he didn't paint these still lifes or anything with a plan. Well, he had a plan. His plan was to paint it as he sees it. And so he didn't draw it out and get the perspective all right and everything. He just kind of went around and painted things. So you'll see, like here, this is you guys that have painted. You know, the standard way of doing this is to paint the background and then paint this bottle over the top. Well, you can see on close inspection that that wasn't really how this was done. And in fact, a lot of times he paints the background right up to the edge and sometimes goes over the edge. Likewise, in this part of the painting with the basket, it's almost like he paints the basket after he paints the apple. See how those brush marks go? And because he's doing that, it almost looks as though this basket of apples that the apples may just roll off the table. And so, why is that significant? Well, by this time, painters were emphasizing the characteristics of the paint. They were questioning what they see. They were trying to paint things that we couldn't see. Van Gogh's swirling fireballs in the sky. Couldn't see that with your naked eye. We could see pointillism, the component colors, a scientific experiment on how we perceive colors. And this is an experiment on how we perceive things, dare I say. And so I have this one because it's famous. But Cezanne continued. There's a lot of Cezannes and they all kind of fit the bill. And so Mont Saint Victory, this was outside of his home, his studio, and he painted this many times. He painted it many times, and that was kind of like Monet painting haystacks over and over again. Because every time you see it, you see something a little different. And so, in that respect, they're kind of the same, but their approach, Cezanne was throwing away all of these academic ideas about background, then you paint, then you paint the big mountain, then you paint the snow cap on the mountain, then you paint the trees in front of that, and then you put the house in front of the Bob Ross way of making paintings. Not Cezanne. He was, I'm going to paint this the way I see it when I see it. And so if you take a look at this, we have three areas here. This is the background. This is the middle ground. And this, to the bottom, is the foreground. And so he didn't put this together with atmospheric perspective. He didn't use linear perspective. He didn't do any of that stuff. He looked at the mountain and painted the mountain. He looked at the middle ground and painted it. Looked at foreground. So they all really have kind of the same focus because whatever you look at is what is in focus. If it's close, if it's kind of far away, or if it's very far away. And again, let me zoom in on this because this is like really important. You see, the sky and everything is painted in a lot of ways right around the mountain. And he used a lot of patchwork in his paintings. And so you see these things, these areas of green lines and these little kind of squares, if you will, of paint. You see that little house and so on. And so he painted what he saw when he saw it. And it replaced kind of the question of, or the statement of, this is what I see, and turns it almost into a question. Is this what I see? So, add to that Cezanne's work, and a lot of his work is like this. And here you go, the bathers, they said a little later and towards the end of his life, but he paints them in kind of the same way. It just kind of starts painting, and there's no respect, particularly about foreground. A lot of stuff seems stacked, flying without a net, if you will. And so, anyway, I'll back up a little bit. Excuse me. So this kind of painting, I have another point to make about that, and that is that a couple of artists would come around right around this time, and they would see Paul Cézanne's paintings that look like this, and they said, this is really genius. We can do something with these ideas. Those painters were George Braque and Pablo Picasso, and Cubism. Cubism was started in a way by emulating the work of Paul Cézanne. And because what happens here when you stack the areas up one on top of the other is that the whole painting becomes very flat. And Cubism adored, emulated, wanted to make all of their work flat. In fact, they thought that the idea of creating the illusion of space, the illusion was a lie. And they wanted their work to be much more honest and forthright. Anyway, and so they're the bathers. And kind of to finish up, I'll go through this. There were other people doing a lot of things. This kind of quasi neo classical, without the kind of pictorial rigor and polish of classicism. But nevertheless, these things continue. The apparition, Gustave Moreau. There are people painting about spiritual things, things that you can't see, things that only an artist can show you. And here's another one by Moreau. Odilon Redon, the Cyclops, the sleeping nude, the Cyclops. This is kind of a combination of a lot of things. The Romanticism, the idea of the Cyclops comes out of Tales of the Brave Ulysses by Homer. Bottom line, it's a lot of things. And this is actually kind of impressionistic, if you will. So anyway, we see a lot of fracturing, and we see a lot of cross-pollination. Henri Rousseau, Sleeping Gypsy, Museum of Modern Art, by the way. And so it's kind of about the sleep of reason produces monsters. It's kind of painted in a way that will inspire surrealists in the 20th century. And so, like I say, we're fracturing all of this. Is another Rousseau, The Dream, 1910. A lot of these works were about spirituality. A lot of these were about religion and mythology. And a lot of these were about humankind's place in nature. James Ensor, Christ Entry into Brussels, which I think is like really pretty cool. This is James Ensor will paint for a number of years past this, but he becomes what we would call an expressionist. And again, we see all of that Renaissance academic stuff just really go by the wayside in favor of things that were, at least at the time, were called more primitive. And a lot of these artists, when you talk about this being more primitive, would say that it was being more honest. I'm doing what I see. And if it's exaggerated, that's how I see it. And so these things become personal. And why did they become personal? Because we don't have a lot of what you would say domination of artists by government, politics, emperors, popes and bishops, wealthy people, and so on. We see the artist in all of this finding their own voice and creating their art from their own perspective. It becomes very much more individual. And so, with that said, can you guys hear that baby crying?
Just a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm home. That's babysitting. Anyway, that's all I got for today. Finish up peer-reviewed sources, quiz 3, and I'll see you Wednesday. Thanks for being here. Thanks for paying attention, and be safe.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Yeah, you too,
Yeah,
Brooke.
thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda.